Okay.
Okay, I'm Russ Adams, and I have an unusual situation in the war. I was actually in the Coast Guard, but during wartime, or during World War II, the Coast Guard was under the Navy Department, so I was actually on a Navy ship. So I'll get around to that later. Okay, I was born in 1926, and I have a handout I'll give you that you can take with, and it tells you a little bit about, for example, do you have any idea what the price of gas was?
Not a clue. Probably a lot cheaper.
10 cents a gallon.
Oh, gee.
Also, do you know who Marilyn Monroe was?
Yes. Do you know who that was?
She was born in 1926 also.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know who Queen Elizabeth is?
Yep.
Yes.
She was born in 1926 too. So I was born during the Model T days. And anyway, this will give you a rough idea of Tony Bennett, the singer, was also born in 1926. Give you a rough idea. Anyway, I was born during Model T times, and of course Model Ts didn't have heaters in them, so we had a great big horse blanket we sat in the back seat, covered up with that to keep warm. And some of the other things going on at that time, I was born and raised up in the Kirkman area. It's not too far from where you live. I graduated from Kirkman High School in a big class of 6.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Big class.
And there are 2 of us left. By the way, do you have any idea how many World War II veterans are still alive?
Don't know the number.
I think it's around 12 million.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I think there was a total of about 50, 60 million in the first place. But we're dying about 1,200 a day.
Oh, really?
So you're quite a few of the ones. Well, Lee Nelson and I have teamed up to interview quite a few World War II veterans, and quite a few of those that we interviewed when they first started have already died. And so anyway, I'm still left. Anyway, I still have relatives around Kirkman area. I was born on a farm about a mile and 3/4 southeast of Kirkman.
Yeah.
And I had two brothers, one older than I and one younger, who's still around, Rex Adams from up by Kirkman.
Okay.
If you know him.
No.
Well, he raised turkeys and chickens for many years, whatever. So, if you're part of the Farmers Mutual Telephone Cooperative, he's on the telephone board there.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
been for many, many years. So, okay, I had one sister, and again, only just Rex and I are left. Okay, we had on the farm we didn't have electricity. We had the old 3-hole outhouse.
Yeah.
And you guess what they used for toilet paper?
Corn cob? No.
When you're out behind the barn, you have an emergency. Either that, or you took stems of hemp weeds or whatever and used them. But that works, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
But we had Montgomery Ward catalogs just tore off.
Oh, yeah.
Sheets or whatever. We couldn't afford to buy toilet paper. I actually kind of grew up during the Depression, and my first president was Calvin Coolidge. And my second president was Herbert Hoover, and he was during the first Great Depression, when the stock market crashed in 1929. And then the next one was Franklin Roosevelt, and he was president during the whole war, or most of the war until near the end of it. So, okay, we had an indoor pot at night. We could go to the bathroom in, so we didn't have to go outside. And then, do you know what the PWA was during the Depression?
Public Works Administration.
Public Works
Yeah.
Administration.
We did a project over it.
We did it.
We did a project for the same. We did a project over the same class for it.
I think they built outhouses up in Kirkman.
Oh, yeah.
They were really quite neat. They had a whole cement floor, and they had a lift lid on them, and all kinds of stuff. A vent for the air to go out that didn't smell too good. So we got one of those, and mud roads. You know anything about gravity flow gas tanks?
Not.
You didn't have fuel pumps.
Oh, yeah.
So wherever the gas tank was located, well, you had to have the fuel tank above where the carburetor was.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we were going home from Harlan one night. It was raining real bad, and if you took too long getting up a hill, the motor quit.
Oh, it wouldn't.
You ran out of gas. Okay, we were going north. Do you know where Mark Peterson lives?
No.
Well, anyway, there was a little hill there, so we came to Harlan. It rained hard while we were in town. So the only way you could do is to turn the darn car around and back up the hill. Anyway, so we got stuck about halfway up the hill and the motor quit.
Oh, yeah.
So then we had to turn around in the mud and back up the hill, because then you'd have
the
gas flowing in the right direction. Anyway, we got home all right. So We did all our farming with horses, pretty much.
Yeah.
And do you know where the new milk barn is up by Kirkman?
Do you know?
Cow palace.
I haven't been up in that area for a while.
Anyway, my grandpa used to farm that with mules.
Oh yeah.
And my parents were actually married in the house. It was on the place over that's located. Okay, no electricity, kerosene lamps, wood stove, cobs for kitchen, and that kind of stuff. Basically had one pair of shoes.
Yeah.
And we hand milked cows, and as you are aware what cows do at night, and we usually kept them in the barn at night.
Yeah.
And then milked them the next day, and our shoes got stuff on them. And I'm surprised the teachers allowed us to come to school. But we only had one pair of shoes, all we could afford. But I did get caught one time. I used to hunt a little bit and trap, so I caught a skunk, and he got me a little bit. And same shoes, remember?
Oh yeah.
And the teacher did send me home on that one, tell me I cleaned up a little bit. So. Okay, we finally got our first tractor in the late 1930s, an Alice Chalmers, if you know anything about farming.
Yeah.
And those would be kind of collector items right now.
Yeah.
So. But we also had a battery-operated radio, but we had no way to charge the battery. So we had to bring the battery to Harlan to get it charged up.
Oh yeah.
And so I heard about Pearl Harbor on that radio in 1943, and I was still, again, I was only 17 when I graduated from high school.
Yeah.
And the war was at its height. This was 1943. Remember, I was still 17 years old. Are you guys 17 yet?
I'm 16 right now.
Both 16?
Yeah.
Well, I actually went in the service when I was 17.
Oh yeah.
Just a year older.
So that'd be, yeah.
So you can kind of relate to that. A year from now, you'd be gone. Of course, we didn't have kindergarten in Kirkman at that time. So
Oh yeah.
I started early and ended early. Okay, a week after I graduated from high school in May, I took off for California, and I got a job in a B-17 bomber factory, building B-17 bombers, and probably the best bomber ever built. It could actually fly on one motor. It was a 4-motor bomber. Do you guys happen by any chance to know Joe Lucian from over in Erling?
No.
Okay, he actually was flying in a B-17 bomber over Europe when he got shot down.
Oh really?
So actually, I knew when he was talking about where he bound or where he bailed out of, because I had helped build the thing.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, I think he's still alive over there too. If you ever want to do another interview, it'd be a pretty good one to do. Okay, I enlisted in the Coast Guard in August of 1943. My brother was already in the Coast Guard in the South Pacific, and he was on a ship, the same kind of ship I got on. And my service was in the North Pacific, and he was in the South Pacific. Now, do you have any idea what lies up in the North Pacific?
That's the
Cold War.
Alaska.
Alaska.
And the Aleutian Islands.
Yeah.
And where did we get the Aleutian Islands in Alaska from?
Didn't Japan have control of those for a while?
You're getting ahead of yourself right at the
Oh.
moment. Where did we get them from in the first place?
Alaska?
Where did we get it from?
Russia.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And what happened in 1865?
65. Cold War? No.
The Civil War ended.
Oh, 18. My bad. Thought you said 19.
1865.
18, yeah.
Okay, 2 years after that, we purchased Alaska and the Aleutian Islands from the Russians. And you have any idea how much we paid for it?
Not a clue.
How about $1.25 an acre?
Oh, really?
Yeah, about somewhere in there. Pretty good purchase, right?
Yeah.
How'd you like to buy a farm for $1?
That would not be bad.
Anyway, the Aleutian Islands are part of Alaska. And now, do you know who Sarah Palin is?
Yeah.
Okay, remember she said she could sit on her front porch and see Russia from her front porch. Do you know how far that is?
It's like 21 miles.
Is it 21 miles?
1,200 miles.
1,200?
Or more, maybe 1,400.
14.
We looked this up
from where she lives in Wasilla, Alaska, which is right next to Anchorage.
Yeah.
You have to look clear across the Bering Strait, and that's pretty close to 1,400 miles.
Yeah.
And she has mighty good eyesight to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Besides that, if you know anything about the curvature of the Earth, it's only about 16 miles before it starts disappearing.
Oh yeah. So
all she'd be doing is looking off in space.
Yeah.
Also, she hadn't studied her geography very well. Okay, I enlisted in 1943, and I went through boot camp up at Alameda, California, which is in the San Francisco Bay area. And we used to row around San Francisco Bay as part of our training.
Oh yeah.
And I got on the ship. Well, I went to radar school down in San Diego first, and became a radar man, radar operator.
Oh yeah.
And that was when it was really new, and it had just been developed, I think, by the British. I can't remember for sure. Anyway, when I got back from that, I was assigned to a ship called the USS Pasco. It's a patrol frigate. It's to give you some perspective as to how long it was. You know how long a football field is?
Yeah.
It was 3 foot longer than that.
Oh really?
303 foot. See, a football field's 300 feet.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, that'll give you an idea of what it was. Okay, at that time, you probably ought to be a little bit aware of what was going on in the world. And there was pretty good reason to believe we might lose the war at that time. Now, I don't know if you can see, you want to come over on this other chair here, and then you can hold these things up.
Yeah.
The guy not
Here,
running
do you
the
want to do
camera.
it so I can run the... Yeah.
You want to sit there, and then you can hold these up in case you want to. By the way, here's a picture of the B-17 bomber that you know, hold it up. So I have a little bit of a shaky hand here, so. Okay, again, I used to work right in next to the wings in here, and then do what they did to plumbing cutouts where all the hydraulic systems went through out into the wings to run the plane, whatever, the wings or whatever you want to run. Okay, that's enough of that one if you want. Just throw it on the floor. Okay, you need to be aware a little bit about where the Japanese were at the time. Everything in green on here, if your camera's picking that up, was all controlled by the Japanese. Okay, now I'm going to get onto this bigger map right behind you here. Okay, now do you know where Hawaii is, right?
Yeah.
Can you see it on here? Yeah. Okay, that was bombed in December 7th, 1941. Okay, a year later, approximately, Midway Island was attacked by the Japanese. Okay, now they sent 2 task force at that time. They sent one down to Midway Island, and at the same time they sent another one up to the Aleutian Islands to attack, and they were going to try to occupy parts of Alaska. Anyway, at the time when this was going on, they were losing the Battle of Midway and decided to call it off. But they did leave the task force up in the Aleutian Islands. Now, they did take 2 islands. They took both Attu Island and Kisk Island, which are the last 2 out here in the Aleutian chain. And I'll turn this over because I have a little bigger map where you can see it better. These 2 islands here, this is Attu, that's the last one in the Aleutian chain, and then Kisk Island, which is the next biggest one. Okay, they first landed on Adak Island here and did occupy it for a little bit, but they decided it was too far and the weather was too bad. And in the Aleutian Islands, if you know anything about the weather, it can go from 0 wind to 100 miles an hour in just a matter of minutes.
Oh yeah.
And this I'll tell you about. That's how I lost some of my shipmates during a storm like that. Okay, Anchorage is back over here, and that's where Palin said she could see Russia from her front porch. Well, the first part of Russia that she could see would be over here somewhere, so I don't think she can see that far.
Probably not.
It's a bad joke. Okay, so Aleutian Islands, well, Alaska starts down here, comes up, and all of this, plus the Aleutian Islands, and that's what we bought for about $1.25 an acre. But the Russians were having a war at that time. They needed money.
Needed the money, yeah.
And so that's why we were able to get it so cheap. But it's been a pretty good investment. We got oil from it. We got gold from it, lots of gold. So it's more than paid for itself. Okay, another thing you need to be aware of is the International Dateline, which runs just outside the Aleutian Islands. They made a break and go out this way and then down around the Aleutian Islands. Now that's important because I'm going to tell you a little story about that. During the war, I got a Thanksgiving dinner in 1944, and it was a pretty good meal. We had all the trimmings because the guys in service, they got what they wanted to eat, and the people back home, your parent or grandparents or whatever, didn't necessarily.
Yeah.
So we had a really good meal. I got to taste that meal 4 times in one day.
Oh yeah.
You know, can you figure out how I did that? The International Dateline was out here
Oh.
on the other side. Okay, we were on that side of the International Dateline going over toward Japan to do some bombing runs and that kind of stuff. Anyway, we had this big turkey dinner, and so I got that all down, and the weather got bad. Guess what happened?
You had to go back?
I lost it.
Oh, you...
Barf.
Oh.
Seasickness, in other words. So then the next day we came back across the international date line. Now that's still the same day as it was over here.
Oh, yeah.
So that we had the leftovers from that meal, and the weather got bad again. And guess what happened? I lost it again. That's 4 times to taste the same meal. So anyway, that's kind of a different story. In case you wonder what I looked like back then, probably not too much different than you guys a year from now. Okay, the kind of ship I got on is this. And again, it's about 303 feet from stem to stern. I'm going to put that one down. Now, I have the sizes on there, but let's throw it down. It's not very much. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about what kind of stuff is on the ship. We had a lot of depth charges because we did convoy duty. And what you did is you make a run. If a submarine's trying to attack you and you're aware of it, you make a run over the top of them, you roll these depth charges off the back. They're about the size of a 30-gallon barrel filled with high explosive. And they have a thing you can set how deep you're going to set it to go off. When we were first getting our ship, down off San Diego, the bridge told the guy one of my friends on the back of the ship to set it at 10 feet. Now,
that'd be pretty
close.
Yeah.
Okay, it went off at 10 feet. Guess what happened to our ship? We went way up in the air. And I thought for a while we were gonna blow the back end off the ship, but we didn't. Anyway, depth charges in the back, and then we had 2 twin 40mm cannons right here, one on each side of the ship. And they're 2 cannons that have bullets about yay long, whatever. So, and they fire pretty fast, but they're not set explosives. They explode on contact. Anyway, we could fire those pretty good. Then we had a 3-inch 50 caliber cannon here, and we had another here, and then we had one on the bow up front. So that's kind of the explosive we had on there. And then we had a whole bunch of 20mm cannon on there. And once in a while we would get firing at airplanes, whatever, so hard that the barrel would get hot and the shell would explode in the barrel. So and blow the end of the barrel off. So if you're real lucky, it didn't get you. So anyway, you can throw that one down. Here's a picture of the Aleutian Islands. The weather gets rather violent once in a while. I'll tell you more about that later because it causes some serious problems from time to time. This is pictures of our ship and how it goes now. If you can imagine, I think the front, almost half of the ship is underwater here. Now remember, you're talking about something the length of the football field, and we're in rather rough water, as you can see, and the ship would go down underneath the wave like that, and it would hit the bottom and back up like this and come up over the top of the wave. So you can imagine what that can do to your stomach if you're inclined to be at all seasick. Anyway, that's just some pictures of what we did in bad weather. Here's a picture of the bow of the ship. Give a chance to see it a little bit. We had 2 different kinds of radar on there. One was looked like a bed spring, and that was for anti-aircraft, and they rotate. And I don't know if you know anything about radar. You know how it works? Have you ever been radared by the police? Same idea.
With a little, yeah.
Okay, what you do is you send a electromagnetic wave out. You know what direction you send it because you know where the antenna points.
Yeah.
Okay, you also know how long it takes to go out there and back, and you have a thing that will measure that time. It's only going at, what, 176,000 miles a second, like that. But anyway, you know what direction you send it, and you know how fast it's going, so yeah, that's how you tell how far you are away from something like a ship or plane or whatever. So that's the same way you tell how fast your car is going.
All right.
Okay, we'll throw that one down if you want. Okay, what we did was we would when we came from down here in San Francisco and Seattle and came up, and we stopped at Kodiak Island. Either one of you happen to know Anchor Rasmussen here in Harlan?
Yeah.
He was actually stationed on that island there most of the time for almost 3 years, I think. But he used to have to tunnel his way out in the wintertime because the snow got so deep. They lived in Quonset huts, you know what a Quonset hut is, a round roof building.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's basically what they lived. Anyway, we stopped there first when we first got to the Aleutian Islands in 1944, and the war was at its height, and we were fighting back. A little bit before that, though, in 1942, that was a year after Pearl Harbor. That's when they had the attack on the Aleutian Islands. And the Japanese actually occupied these two islands here, Attu and Kiska Island, for about a year before we took them back. And that's the only United States-owned territory ever occupied by a foreign nation. And they were occupied for about a year. And the second bloodiest battle of World War II took place on Attu Island to retake it. And the Japanese had, I don't know, a couple thousand there, and we invaded with 16,000, I think, in an amphibious landing. And the last day or so, the Japanese were out of food and out of ammunition. So they tried to, these things are mountainous. They go almost straight up out of the ocean for 2,000 or 3,000 feet. And Attu was like that too. Okay, the last day after the invasion of Attu, well, there was about, I think 800 Japanese left, and there were 400 or 500 of them that were very sick. So they actually gave them an overdose of drugs to kill them off. Their own people did. And so then there was just, I don't know, 400 or 500 left the last day. And they tried to overrun the American positions and get food and ammunition from them. Well, they didn't quite get away with it, so they got stopped. But anyway, then they, rather than be taken prisoner, where they took a hand grenade and held to their chest and committed suicide. So there were only about 30 left of all the Japanese on Attu Island when it finally got done. Kiska Island had a huge underground hospital that the Japanese had built, and when the United States invaded it, well, the Japanese had managed to get off of there the night before or so on submarines, and so there were no Japanese left on there, but there were still 30 or so Canadians and Americans killed. They shot each other by mistake.
Oh, really?
Friendly fire. So, but anyway, we finally got them off a year after they had occupied it. Okay, when I first got to the Aleutian Islands, why, this is kind of what it looked like, and a little island here called Unalaska, which is the first big island in the chain, kind of looked like this, and that becomes an important story here after a bit, but you may not be able to see it. There's a Russian church. Now you remember they were owned by Russia for a while, and that's a Russian Orthodox church, and it's still there. It's basically a Catholic church, but it's the Orthodox version of it. The two different, the current Catholic Church and the Russian Orthodox Church are actually two different ones. For example, the Russian Orthodox clergy can marry and that kind of stuff, whereas the one run by the Vatican, you're not supposed to get married and that kind of, although sometimes you do have a Catholic priest who is married. So, okay, that's kind of what that looked like when we first got there. Now, there's an important thing that happened to me when I was in high school. I had a brother about your age, and he had become more or less an alcoholic. And seeing what that was doing to him, I was about 4, 5, or 6 years younger than he, and I decided I would never let that happen to me. And that really becomes important because it probably saved my life. Okay, we would come back into Dutch Harbor after a convoy, taking supplies, and then out to the different islands. We'd stop and leave them off. But we got back to Dutch Harbor on December 28th of 1944, and there's a little town. Let's see if I can find a picture of it here. Yeah. This is the way the town looks now, with about 5,000 people in it. Okay, when we were there was about 60 people because they'd taken all the native population back over onto the mainland Alaska because they thought they might collaborate with the Japanese. And anyway, when we got there, there was only about 60 or so, plus about 40,000 troops, American troops, stationed there. And our ship pulled in. We would pick up our convoys at Dutch Harbor and then take them out into the Aleutians. And then on alternate months, we'd do a month of convoy duty, and then we'd do a month where we'd go from, turn this over again here. Okay, this is Russia, and there was an island right here called Paramashur Island, right in the north edge of Japan. Japan down here, of course. By the way, what happened to Japan here yesterday?
Yesterday? Did you hear anything? I didn't.
Who fired a missile over the top of it?
Oh, North Korea?
North Korea did. Fired right over the top of Japan, went over somewhere, and what we're worried about is they may try to bomb with an atomic bomb in Alaska or whatever. Anyway, this island right in here, they had about 140,000 troops, Japanese crack troops up there stationed. And part of our job was to come over here and do bombing runs or whatever, and make them think we were going to invade Japan from there, from the Aleutian Island.
Yeah.
And we did a pretty good job of it, because they kept all those crack troops up there for the whole time. And we would go over and make bombing runs, whatever, on this island, Parameter Island, if you ever heard of it. But it's the first big island south of the Russian peninsula. Russia was not in the war at that time against Japan. They were in the war against Germany, but not against Japan. Yeah. Okay, so we were trying to get them to join against it. And so our ship, for example, we took it back down to Seattle, Washington, and refitted it and took it back up to Cold Bay, Alaska, which is up right in here somewhere. And we gave it to the Russians, and I helped train about a couple hundred Russians on our ship to take over our ship. And we did what they call lend-lease, in case we were supposed to lend it to them, and they were supposed to pay us a fee for it, but they wouldn't pay. So we took it back later after the war got over. And it eventually ended up in Japan later on, too. So, but anyway, let's see. Okay, I'll go back to Dutch Harbor. It's important for this reason, that we would go on Liberty in this little town. Now, again, this is the way the town looks now, about 5,000 people. The reason we know that is my wife and I went back up there in 2001. Now, you could go on Liberty there, and there's a little town that had a bar and theater, basically, about all it had at that time, plus that church was still there. Anyway, I went on Liberty that night. They let a third of the ship go on Liberty each at a time. The other two-thirds had to stay on board the ship just in case we would get attacked or whatever while we were gone. So Dutch Harbor had been bombed real bad in about June of 1942, at the same time that they were going to try to attack Midway, and then also the other task force to the Aleutian Islands. And so anyway, they had killed a bunch of Americans, and we got there after that was all done. But anyway, a third of our shipmates went on Liberty that night, and the weather was kind of bad. And you want to lay that one down for a little bit there? Let's see. Okay. Anyway, we would get off on our ship, and we would go walk down here, and then go across over the ferry right across here. And the little town is down along in here, and this is all mountainous, by the way. Okay, we went across, and the weather was fairly decent, but not too bad. But remember, this is December 28th, which is after Christmas.
Yeah.
Okay, I went to the theater that night because I didn't drink. The rest of the guys pretty much went to the bar. First of all, there was a gal there named Kiska Pat who was well developed, if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, they all went down to see her and get drunk and that kind of stuff. Well, during the night, Willow Wall came up, which is going from about no miles per hour on the wind up to about 100 miles an hour. And it also started storming real bad. We had a major blizzard. Well, these guys didn't get out of the bar in time, and they shut down the ferry so they could not get back. Well, I got back across before the weather got really terrible bad. Four of my shipmates, one was my best friend, they midnight requisitioned the boat. You know what that is? Stole it.
Yeah.
Okay, they were going to roll back so they didn't get caught for being AWOL coming back. Anyway, there were four of them crowded in this little boat that was probably designed for two in calm weather, and they didn't make it back. They drowned. And so I lost four of my shipmates. One slept about that far away from them. By the way, talk about sleeping, you can throw that one down. On our ship, you had a pipe that was like this, and then you had your mattress you put on top of that, and that was your bed, or your bunk. Well, anyway, we had on our mattress, it was about yay wide and whatever, about maybe. Anyway, they put it into a thing that looked like a pillowcase, and you know what they called that? Fart sack. Don't ask me how come they called it. By the way, whenever you first get in the service, you soon find out that it isn't your mother is trying to get you out of the sack in the morning. In boot camp, what they called your name or told you to get out of bed at, I don't know, 6 o'clock in the morning or whatever. If you weren't out on the first call, they dumped you out.
Yeah.
And if you happened to be on the top bunk, well, you had quite a fall. So I found out the first day that it was time when they called it, they meant it was time to get up. So I never got dumped out, but the guy next to me did. And I saw him fall from the top bunk to the floor and decided that wasn't for me. So, okay, where did I leave off? Talking about our dead shipmates. Anyway, my best friend had just gotten a butch haircut that day, and he had bought one of these great big fur hats somewhere. I don't know where, a gift shop, someplace like that. And so he did manage to swim back to a dock, and some guy reached down on the dock to grab him and got a hold of the hat, but there was no hair there to get a hold of because he just got a butch that day, shorter than yours.
Oh, yeah?
And there was nothing there to get a hold of, and so he drowned too. They found 2 of the bodies the next day, and they found a 3rd body. We had to go back on convoy duty because the war don't stop just because you've got people are dead. So we had to take a convoy out, and then about a month later they found the 3rd body. We buried him then when we got back, and I'll show you a picture later here as to where we buried him. You couldn't bury him underground because it was all rock, pretty much. So what we did is we put the caskets on top of the ground and piled rocks on it so the wild animals couldn't get into it. So, and then they did bring all of the ones that they found back to the States in 1948. Our 4th shipmate never did find the body. He's still in the bay up there somewhere, but I'm sure he deteriorated completely by now. So, okay. I told you that my wife and I went back up there because I wanted to see where my shipmates had been killed off or whatever. So we went back in 2001. We got there in June. And in June there was still lots of snow on. I'll show you some pictures here later showing you what that looks like. But I did get to go down on the beach, and I knelt down and said a prayer for my lost shipmates. And I'll give you a handout here before you go. I wrote a thing about it that I'll give you a copy of to take along. Because if I read it to you, I'll probably shed a tear or two. Because even though that's 65 years ago or so, you still remember when a close friend dies. Have you guys, either one of you, lost a close friend?
I haven't.
It'll shake you up pretty good for a while, believe me, and you may not quite ever get over it. So anyway, I lived through that because of not drinking that night. I went to the theater instead of the bar, and the decisions we make, you never know where they're going to take us. So, okay, my wife and I, when we went back up there, I'll show you some pictures. This is a hotel that we stayed in when we went back. It wasn't like that when I was up there the first time. But like I said, there's about 5,000 people there now, and they've allowed all the native population to come back, and they more or less own it now. Okay, we stayed in this motel, and guess who built that motel? The Japanese.
Oh, really?
Yes. They didn't have to take it over by force. They just bought it. Okay, right in the lobby, there is the exact spot where about 25 or 30 Americans were killed in the bombings in 1942. The Americans asked the Japanese if they could put a plaque up to memorialize those guys who got killed, and the Japanese said no. That was nice of them, wasn't it? Yeah. Anyway, that's the motel we stayed in, and right outside the window, the native population can fish for free anytime they want because it's their land. They can do whatever they want. So we watched them fish for salmon right out the window because there's a big bay right next to the motel on the other side, I think. In fact, I think that's part of it there. So, well, you can see it here too. Anyway, they fish night around the clock. But anyway, they were going to have a July 4th celebration at dusk. You know what time of night that was? About midnight.
Is it? Oh, yeah.
So it don't get dark up there until, and then it also is dark one part of the year, almost 24 hours a day, but it's light almost 24 hours a day the other half of the year. So anyway, you can throw that one down if you want. Okay, they have a railroad up there, and by the way, they have 35 miles of highway on the whole island.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and what the speed limit is? 35 miles an hour. Anyway, this is the railroad. It's, I don't know, 200 or 300 feet long. And what it does is there's a dry dock here, and you put your ship on the rails on a gurney or whatever you want to call it, and then you pull it up inside here, and then you can see it's pretty high. You can work on your ship, and we ended up in that during the war. But we loaded our ship on the rail and then pulled it up inside here to work on it. Anyway, that's basically what that is. You really can't see it real good, but this is a pillbox, and what that is a cement structure with slits in it. Okay, during the war, the Japanese were going to try to invade. They had these located all around the bay, and the American servicemen would crawl inside there and then point machine guns out, and they could mow them down when they tried to land on the beach. They never got that far, but they came mighty close. Whatever, that's right outside the hotel there. So. Okay, this is they opened a brand new museum up there for the Aleuts, or I think it's Algonquin Indians or something like that, the native population. And I got a chance to do the drawing because they just opened it when we were there, my wife and I visiting. And I got to draw names out of the hat for the gifts they were giving away, being I was the only soldier there at the time they opened it, so that's kind of interesting. Throw that one down if you want. Okay, the cemetery where we buried our guys are right above this memorial, and the Japanese also have people buried there. It's in the Russian Orthodox cemetery, but I crawled back up on the beach there. Remember I told you they had moved all of them back to the States in 1948. Well, I walked up to where we had buried our guys, and this is the memorial to all the guys who were killed in the Aleutians. I don't know if you're aware of what goes on in Dutch Harbor in particular. It's the largest commercial fishing seaport in the world, probably. And if you eat salmon or if you eat fish, halibut and that kind of stuff, well, you're probably getting it from there. If you ever watch Discovery Channel, they've had where some of the ships that fish for salmon and stuff up in the Aleutian Islands, where they've actually been sunk and whatever. So. Okay, I told you there was a bar up there. There's the bar, and it's still there. It's called the Elbow Room. And that's where our guys went to drink that night when I went to the theater. But it's, Playboy magazine says it's the most notorious bar in the Western Hemisphere. They have all kinds of stabbings and stuff there because it's primarily fishermen from all over the world who come in there, and so they get in big bar fights, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, that's the Elbow Room. That's where they went. Also, when my wife and I was up there, where do the eagles go in the summer? Right there, Dutch Harbor. So if you see any eagles around here, that's where they go. Okay, this is the theater. Used to be the theater. It's now a senior citizen center, so it's still there too. This is a picture of the little town going down through there. I don't remember what's on the other side. Yeah, they've redone the church, and it's all been repainted and refinished and all that kind of stuff. And they still bury some of the Aleutian people there. In fact, there was a fresh grave right there the day I walked up on the side of the thing. Okay, you get an idea what the mountains are like in the background. But all the houses there, they have to bring them all in. What they do is they bring them in on big barges. There's no trees in the Aleutian Islands to mount anything. I think there was one tree on Attu Island when we were there, and the rest are whatever. By the way, on Attu Island, we were probably 40 or 50,000 troops when we were there, and then we'd go in there and resupply our ship. But also there were about 7 nurses on there, so they had to send a few of them home because they were sending 4 or 5 times their paycheck home. Do you have any idea what they were doing?
Probably being prostitutes.
Probably.
Yeah.
And they're sending home a lot more in their paycheck, and so they sent them home. So that's just another picture of the buildings there. Same thing. Here's a picture of a crying eagle. I wrote a thing about when 9/11 happened about the eagle cries again. I don't remember where I put that one. Anyway, you can see what the town looks like now. It's quite a bit different when we were there. Okay, there was a guy in a big Jeep took us, my wife and I, all over the island when we were there. And so we got to go up in the mountains, and this is up next to a big gun emplacement that's no longer there, but the remnants are still there. And we were up on the side of the mountain, you can see looking down over the valley. this is probably 2,000 or 3,000 feet up in the air. But this was in summer of 1942, or 2001. Okay, this is the menu for the meal. I got to taste 4 times, and as you can see, we had an onboard artist who put his foot on the neck of a Japanese, and we were having dinner. So, and then if you want to see what we ate, we had all the trimming there. Yeah, it's all there. Another picture of the elbow room. This is a better picture that I took of the church when we were there, and it really has been redone completely. It's really quite a church. I forgot to tell you, we had a dog mascot on board our ship, and his name was Snatchblock. And this is a picture of Snatchblock. Anyway, we got into a typhoon between Paramushir Island and Attu Island one day, and do you know what a typhoon is? Same thing as a hurricane, but in the Pacific they call them typhoons instead of hurricanes. Anyway, we were running toward Japan, and we got within about 100 miles because we were running ahead of the storm. Well, we knew if we went any farther, why we'd get in turn and be there for the rest of the war in a prison camp or shot, one of the two. So we finally turned the ship and headed up north toward the Kamchatka Peninsula, up toward here. We were down in here somewhere. Anyway, we headed toward here, running through the troughs, going 45 degrees this way and 45 degrees that way.
Oh, yeah.
If you go 46, you turn over.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 45 is supposed to be as far as you can go before you upset and go over the top. So, Admiral Nimitz, I think it was out down in the South Pacific, and he sent 3 torpedoes out, or not torpedoes, but destroyers out during that same typhoon, and they did roll over and capsize, and all aboard, with the exception of about 6 total, didn't survive. And he almost got court-martialed for that, but he was such a big hero they didn't want to do anything to him. So anyway, he got out of that all right. Anyway, during that storm, that dog decided to commit suicide and jumped over the side. He really did. He'd had enough. Another thing, sailors have a tendency to pick up things, and so some of our sailors managed to get hold of a little monkey somewhere along the line. He was on board the ship. And if you know anything about bean pots, we had a bean pot probably about that high and about yay big around. And the night before you eat white beans, well, you soak them. So we put the white beans in the kettle and put water in to soak them. Somehow during the night the monkey got in that pot and drowned and went to the bottom. And the next day we cooked the beans, and so they were serving the beans, and monkey hair and body parts were beginning to come out. Talk about getting seasick. These guys didn't get seasick, but they all went to the rail and barfed over the side. I don't think the monkey thought it was very funny, but it really was kind of funny in a way. So, okay, this is where we buried our guys, and this is where we lined up to say our last rites or whatever for him. This is when we buried the first 2, and we buried another one when we came back, and the 4th one never did find. So, okay. This is some other stuff you might want to look at. And there's some pictures in here that are pretty good, better than the ones I took. Here's a pretty good picture of what it looks like at Dutch Harbor. And our 4 shipmates got dead down in that area down there. But that's now where a big fish processing plant is right at the moment. So. Okay, I have one more handout for you. Oh, by the way, I wrote a book about the history of our ship, and it's not really published. I just made it for all my shipmates. But 50 years after a major event, you can get a copy of your ship's log. So from the National Archives, I got a copy of our deck log, which is day-by-day account of what we do going in on the ship. So then I use that as a basis to write the book. Okay. Here's a tribute to my shipmates. You can have a copy of that. Take that with you if you want. Just for curiosity's sake, I think you're in a history class, aren't you?
Yeah.
What war caused the most American deaths?
Was it, well, Civil War?
Civil War.
Yeah.
Over 600,000. World War II is 500,000 or so, more or less. So actually the Civil War, but there was over 100,000 of those in the Civil War died from malnutrition and dysentery. You know what dysentery is? Your bowels start running, you can't make them stop until you dehydrate and die.
Really?
So I think Andersonville prison, I think down in somewhere in the south is where that took place. Anyway, that's what that is. Okay, now do you have any questions up to that point?
No, pretty much covers it.
I was listening to the radio where I just got done helping turn our ship over to the Russians, and I've been stationed on Kodiak Island for a while. And let's see, you guys, you know what naked women look like, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay. I was working in the cafeteria there, and this guy, he said, "Do you want to see a whole bunch of naked women?" I hadn't seen any women at all for almost a year, and so would you take that up?
Yeah.
Probably. So did I. So we went over outside the gym and pulled the window down about a little far, and there was a civil service group of women that worked over on Kodiak Island, and they all came there one day a week and took showers and worked out and that kind of stuff. So we stood there looking at them. Anyway, that's kind of hard on a young fellow about your age, not too much older than you. I was about 18, 19, I guess, when that happened, so not too much older than you. Anyway, then we got on this transport ship, and we headed back toward the States. And during that transport, we got pretty close to Prince Rupert, Canada, which was our first stop. And we heard on the radio, or I heard on the radio, that we had wiped a city off the map with one bomb.
Yeah.
The first atomic bomb. So then this a day or so later, I heard that we'd wiped the second one off the map, and the war was over. And so we got into Prince Rupert, Canada, and there were about 200 women standing on top of a warehouse there waving us ashore. And we hadn't seen any, remember, for other than the batch of naked ones that we couldn't get to. So, but anyway, guess what the captain of the ship did? He turned around, went back out to sea, and took us down to Seattle 2 days after the war was over and the celebration was all done. So I missed out on the celebration. Anyway, okay, the war is over now, and I got back and was discharged in May of 19... Well, I got onto another ship for a while because they let you out on point basis. In other words, you had to build up so many points for so many days you're in the service.
Yeah.
Well, I got onto another ship and they froze me on there, which means they won't let you off till you get done doing what you're going to do. And we had to take it from San Francisco over to Charleston, South Carolina through the Panama Canal. And it took a couple, 3 weeks to do that. And probably would cost you $5,000 a head to take that same cruise right now, because going through the Panama Canal is quite an experience. It really is. But I didn't really appreciate it. All I wanted to do was go home. I'd had enough of war and that kind of stuff. Anyway, we finally got over to Charleston, South Carolina, and then I got discharged in May of 1946, and I got discharged in St. Louis, and I flew to Des Moines. My parents were supposed to meet me there. The plane circled over Des Moines. It was fogged in, and they couldn't land, and so my parents had to come back home. So I got there the next day and had to hitchhike back to Harlan. Anyway, then my wife and we got married in August 1946, and I worked in Chevrolet Garage here in Harlan, and farmed for a year, and a bunch of other stuff. Then I decided, my dad had one farm and 4 boys, and what do you do with one farm and 4 boys? You can't all farm it. Yeah. So I had the GI Bill from World War II, and so I decided to go to college, and best thing I ever did, probably. Anyway, I started out at the University of Iowa. I was going to be a lawyer. I darn soon found out that wasn't for me. So I decided to be a teacher instead, and I went up to Cedar Falls, and you see a lot of woodworking stuff around here. I learned how to teach shop and that kind of stuff, and I made most of the stuff hanging around here. But anyway, I went out on a 2-year teaching certificate, and I taught in Tenet the first year. And I have the distinction of having my 7th grade boy as the father of my doctor.
Mm-hmm.
That got your attention, didn't it? Eddie Buman from Tenet is the father of Dr. Sarah DeLion here in Harlan.
Oh, yeah.
So my 7th grade boy from Tenet is the father of my doctor, so it takes you a little while to figure that out, huh? Anyway, that taught in Tennant for a year, and then I went down here to Jackson number 6 east of Jacksonville and taught for a year. Then I went up to Maxwell, Iowa. All the time I was finishing up my 4-year college degree, and taught at Maxwell. And then I couldn't get a very good job anywhere in Iowa or around here, so Portland, Oregon was recruiting teachers at that time. So I went out and taught in Portland for 4 years, and that was an interesting experience too. And I finished up my BS degree from Drake University, and then I came back from Portland after 4 years, and I was principal in Kirtland, Irwin for a couple of years. Went over to Marshalltown as principal for 5 years, superintendent in Elkhorn for a couple of years, director of elementary education here in Harlan for a year. And then I decided to go back and work on my doctorate down at the University of Missouri, and I worked on that. And at the same time I was doing that, I was living over in Kansas City supervising student teachers, and then drove back and forth to the University of Missouri at Columbia. And so then I became superintendent over at East Winona for 5 years, and then I was going to build houses and get rich quick, because my last son had graduated from high school, and the housing market went like it is now at that time. So then they had an opening at Elkhorn again that was for counselor and principal. So I went back there for the next 10 years as counselor and principal. And then I finally retired when I got all of 62, and that's 20 years ago. And I taught college here in Harlan for 15 years at Iowa Western, and then down at Atlantic and down on campus. So, but anyway, some of your parents or people your parents know probably are my former students. I find them all the time. One of them is right next door here.
Oh, yeah?
Linda Quinn, if you know her.
No.
She's head of nursing down at the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
Just retired. And again, like I say, Kelly Jewell and Mitch Osborne both started their career down in Elkhorn under me, so I have a few connections yet. Okay, now, any questions you guys have?
You did a great job covering it.
Okay.
Can't really. Is that it then?
Yeah. What are you guys going to do when you're done with your high school?
Go to college, probably.
Yeah.
The probable say yes.
Yes.
Yeah, if you start, oh, by the way, over there is my memorial to myself.
I'll get. See if
If
we
you
can
want to
find
pick
this
that up.
one. Yeah.
I decided to make that so I can keep track of whatever.
Yeah.
I got my ribbons in there and that kind of stuff too, so. Yeah, I decided to build that, but I figured that'd be a good place to keep everything together in one place, so. Okay, I don't really think of anything else, unless you do.